Who failed Texans?
It was a perfect storm of a lot of issues.
Many of you are angry, and you have a right to be. I'm angry too.
And by the way, I'm mad too.
How could you not know that it was foreseeable, very simply, to be able to warn the governor, to warn the PUC, to warn the senators in this chamber?
If you know a storm is coming, you should set all the things up to prepare for it.
I don't know what it is about this grid here, but we always get hit.
I want to know the who, what, where, and why.
You deserve answers. You will get those answers.
The events of last week was a travesty.
I was freezing in the night. My neighbors were freezing.
It is very easy to be outraged about last week's storm that left so many of us freezing in the dark, and I was with my kids trying to sleep in my cold, dark house. I drove through neighborhoods without power to spot a frozen skyline all lit up using electricity that might have literally saved lives. But our lawmakers set up this nonprofit ERCOT board made up largely of profit-making power company representatives who have little incentive to change anything. And right now, power companies can make even more money when their power is in dangerously short supply, like last week, where the price of a megawatt of electricity went from around $35 to ERCOT's maximum allowed of $9,000. And yes, ERCOT allows that. And according to the Texas Tribune, after that bitter cold spell in 2014, one power company executive told investors that this business benefited significantly. And to the extent we get another polar vortex or whatever, absolutely, we'll be opportunistic and take advantage of those conditions. So should we really be surprised with what just happened and those huge bills? Leaders of the state, from the governor on down, promising to fix what went wrong with the Texas power grid. But as our troubleshooter Jay Avila reports, power problems from the winter a decade ago also led to warnings and official investigations that failed to prevent this month's crisis.
After winter power outages in 2011, state and federal regulators sounded the warning improvements were needed to protect the energy supply. But when this month's storm hit, their recommendations still had not been made mandatory for the power industry. 2011's storm should have been a wake-up call, but it was nothing compared to what we felt this month. The state spent 7 hours enduring outages then, compared to 70 hours this time. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which sets standards for ERCOT and power companies, is conducting an inquiry into this month's event, just as it did in 2011.
We had a report that had some recommendations in it. We'll be looking to see how those recommendations were implemented and whether or not they were effective or there are additional things that need to be put in place.
The 2011 report stated more thorough preparation for cold weather could have prevented many of the weather-related outages, and said power generators were disabled by freezing instrumentation, freezing pipes, freezing drain lines, and natural gas curtailments. It recommended winterization methods like insulating pipes or attaching warming cables that can heat them up, like an electric blanket, portable heaters to prevent components from freezing, and windbreaks that shelter equipment from winter gusts.
But history repeated itself in this case. It was severe winter that caused problems for our power grid back in 1989 and again in 2014. And a lesson that El Paso did learn from. They are not without power tonight after spending millions on that grid and weatherization.
Electricity is right up there as something we absolutely have to have. And when we don't, the disruption is not just an inconvenience today, it costs lives. When the lights go out, it doesn't look and ask you whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Had we passed this bill when I first got here, we would have been well on our way to have full protection, and a lot of this wouldn't have happened.
I don't know what it is about this grid here, but we always get hit.
People here lost power twice this morning alone, just before 5 a.m. and again sometime at 11.
And they just need to do a better job. That's how I feel about it. But there's nothing personally against anybody. I know they're doing the best they can, being a utility worker myself. But somewhere down the line, somebody can do better.
I was out of my home for 3 days without electricity.
Margaret Houston hasn't forgotten about the power failures that put her elderly neighbors in danger and forced her to move in with relatives.
I want to know the who, what, where, and why of this freeze disaster. I want answers.
The state is using every possible resource to fix this problem. Many of you are angry, and you have a right to be. I'm angry too. At a time when essential services were needed the most, the system broke. You deserve answers. You will get those answers.
Following that devastating winter storm that impacted not just homes, but businesses and the energy industry as a whole. And joining us right now is Energy CEO Dan Eberhart. Welcome to the National Desk. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Dan, what happened in Texas? Why were generating facilities impacted so harshly by the weather?
Well, I think that basically Texas just underfunded and underinvested in the energy infrastructure the whole way around. You know, even at Canary, we just didn't expect a 100-year storm, and a lot of the government, the Texas utility regulators, the Texas Railroad Oil and Gas Commission, the Texas Railroad Commission, which monitors oil and gas, they just have been delaying and dismissing needs for winterizing infrastructure costs for years, and those were watered down requests anyway, and it just really caught everybody with their pants down.
CBS Austin's Christian Flores joins us live tonight with what members think they could have done better. Christian?
ERCOT CEO Bill Magnus doubled down on his assertion that these outages were necessary because we were less than 5 minutes away from statewide outages. Now, looking ahead, one thing that they are focusing on is what could have been done ahead of the storm, including coming down harder on weatherization of generators.
What went wrong?
Tell us one thing you would have done different. As CEO of ERCOT, how could you not know?
For more than 5 hours, Texas senators bombarded ERCOT CEO Bill Magnus with questions as to what went into his decision-making process ahead of calling on statewide outages last week during severe winter storms, with many pointing to the deadly consequences in their district.
This is not a Chamber of Commerce update. This is the largest train wreck in the history of deregulated electricity.
Senators also came down hard on ERCOT's communication in the days and hours leading up to the power shutoffs. They did not believe ERCOT appropriately warned Texans and state leaders, which led to so many being caught off guard.
How could you not know that it was foreseeable, very simply, to be able to warn the governor, to warn the PUC, to warn the senators in this chamber?
Do you think that we can at least give people an expectation?
We got to a point too where we just couldn't tell people anything, and that's not good, and that needs to be better.
What do you mean you couldn't tell people anything?
We had no idea when or if generation was going to return.
We have received so many calls and emails with questions about the blackouts, and we wanted to take those questions directly to ERCOT. CBS Austin's Christian Flores spoke with ERCOT's president and CEO today, asking why there is still no power and when people can expect it back.
Do you think it's acceptable to, shut off power for, all these Texans during, freezing temperatures? How is there no way to get power back when it is, at times negative, below 0 degrees outside?
No, it's extremely frustrating, and I can tell you that, what ERCOT's job is, not just now, but 24 hours a day, all year, is to get power delivered to Texans. And this storm system has posed a huge challenge on getting that power delivered. If you have a big imbalance between the supply of electricity and the demand, you can have catastrophic failures of the system.
What would be a more catastrophic outcome than what we got going on?
If we had let the system sort of go into a stage where a blackout would happen, we wouldn't be talking about when are we going to restore the power, when are we going to turn it back on. We would be talking about rebuilding portions of the electric system, which would take we wouldn't be able to do this in days. We wouldn't be able to do this when the weather warmed up. There's rebuilding efforts that could take really long periods of time, and people could be out of power for very extended periods.
After promising transparency, ERCOT and the Public Utility Commission are fighting the release of records that might shed light on their failures. Troubleshooter Jay Avila is working for you against this information blackout.
The power industry has an army of lawyers and lobbyists working to keep the state from releasing operational and maintenance records. And some want the legislature to stick you with the bill for energy overcharges that happened after the emergency was over. But after promising openness, ERCOT, which runs the Texas power grid, has asked the state attorney general that it not be subject to the Public Information Act, so it won't have to release operations logs, trouble reports, and email requested by News 4 San Antonio and other journalists. The Public Utility Commission, which oversees ERCOT, has also asked the AG to keep emergency and weatherization plans secret because they identify particular vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure to an act of terrorism, and it would violate the privacy interests of third parties, namely the energy companies and utilities, including CPS Energy, which filed a brief in support of withholding the records.
Citizens have the right to know these kinds of critical things that affect their pocketbook.
Tom Smitty Smith, a consumer advocate who's covered the Texas power industry for 40 years, says reporters will likely lose the legal battle to get those records. He's urging Texans to pressure lawmakers for the information.
It's absolutely essential at this point that citizens reach out to their legislators and say, get this information, subpoena the documents. Make these people tell us the truth.
We took that suggestion to State Senator Jose Menendez, who sits on the Business and Commerce Committee. You'll remember it held 2 days of hearings on ERCOT's handling of the crisis. Can you subpoena records and get them and make them public?
You know, that's a great question, and I'm going to look into that.
Menendez, a vocal critic of the power industry, says since he's not the committee chair, it's unclear if he can subpoena records.
But what I can do is I can ask you to share with me everything that you're asking them. I can put it in a letter to them, and I can put it in a letter to the Attorney General's office, and I'd be more than happy to.
News 4 San Antonio also sent an email to the chair of that committee, State Senator Kelly Hancock, asking if he's considered subpoenaing records. Menendez says he's also working on legislation to hit power generators with big financial penalties if they fail to weatherize their plants, which is currently voluntary.
We hope to, with this legislation, to have those agencies and those decision makers be more transparent and be more accountable.
I am already working with the legislature on reforms to add more power to the grid and to ensure that we never run out of power again.
And breaking news as we come on the air tonight, it is all hands on deck in Texas after now Tropical Depression Beryl made landfall earlier today as a Category 1 hurricane.
The biggest worry out there, extreme life-threatening heat forecasted to linger in the coming days, which of course will be dangerous for those who can't cool off.
And a major catastrophe was reported all morning long here at the live desk. Those powerful winds knocked out power at one point, 2.7 million people across Texas.
Officials say it will take days or even in some cases weeks just to restore. That's going to be a major problem in Houston, where the heat index today will climb to 105 degrees. Another problem in Houston is flooding. More than a foot of rain fell in just 48 hours in some places. That's typically what falls over the entire summer.
CenterPoint Energy says it's restored service to about 66% of those that lost electricity during Beryl. That means there's still hundreds of thousands going into their 5th day without lights or AC.
1 week later, Texas Governor Greg Abbott told the electricity provider enough is enough.
With more than 2 million Texans still without power just a day after Hurricane Beryl's landfall, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says he's spoken with President Joe Biden for federal assistance on the hurricane cleanup.
He said yes. And so we have agreed to that, and we are appreciative that the federal government has stepped in, and they will pick up most of the cost as we go through recovery here of the storm.
Patrick has been the acting governor since last week, with Governor Greg Abbott out of the country for a trade mission for the entirety of the hurricane. Earlier this morning, Patrick was briefed on the hurricane response at the Texas Division of Emergency Management, or TDEM, facilities in Bryan. I asked him there about Governor Abbott's absence.
Has Governor Abbott's absence at all hindered the response from the state?
No, you know, he and I have worked together now for 9 years as governor and lieutenant governor, and I've been involved in all these situations before, just not as the lead on the team, but he's been in touch with me, he's been in touch with the states.
In recent weeks, both Patrick and Abbott have called for continued investments in the energy grid. ERCOT, which manages the grid, says Texas will need to nearly double its power supply by the end of the decade. Patrick has made fervent calls for grid investments, but tells me the millions without power from Hurricane Beryl shouldn't blame the grid.
What do you want to see done in the future?
So we have to disconnect those two issues. Being out of power from the storm is not related to what we need to do for the grid, which is a totally separate issue. The storm took lines down, took transmission lines down.
In the briefing this morning here at TDEM's facilities in Bryan, Lieutenant Governor Patrick called attention to the fact that folks were coming from all across the state to respond to Hurricane Beryl, some even from West and East Texas, others, including one individual, from all the way in Florida. In Bryan, I'm Michael Atkinson reporting.
And this is a live look right now at the current outage map in Houston and surrounding areas. It is updating every few minutes. The worst areas hit around the storm path. Right now, there are 2.3 million outages being reported. That's not counting those in Fort Bend County where the system has been knocked offline.
You can add the state's Public Utility Commission to the list of voices wondering out loud if Houston's major electric provider should have been better prepared to tackle Hurricane Beryl.
Many want to know if the electric provider was prepared for the storm as it should have been, and should they have had more outside personnel standing by to swoop in after the winds died down. The PUC said in a social media post that they were calling the impacted utilities to Austin today to discuss the storm and what happened afterward.
Now, there's a lot of stark differences between utilities. One utility that serves people along the Gulf Coast, they are 94% restored, but in Houston, those numbers are far lower, much to the frustration of Houstonians. It is day 4 without power and sweltering heat for more than 1 million electric customers in the greater Houston area. During a press conference Thursday, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had sharp words for the electric utility.
The governor announced today that he's asking for an investigation of CenterPoint and any power company that does not deliver.
In Austin, the Public Utility Commission called in executives from several electric companies in the hurricane zone, most notably CenterPoint Energy, which serves the Houston area.
We know that we still have a lot of work to do, and we will not stop the work until it is done.
Jason Ryan is an executive vice president at CenterPoint.
As of today, we have restored more than 50% of the outages. So we've restored about 1.2 million homes and businesses. There's a little over 1 million homes and businesses left to be restored.
Ryan tells the commission they expect to restore 400,000 customers today, 350,000 on Friday, and another 350,000 by Sunday.
That leaves about 500,000 customers that we currently expect to have outages that go into next week.
Ryan spoke about the training CenterPoint workers undergo every year and the preparations they made ahead of Beryl. That includes a request for 10,000 mutual aid crews, bringing the total number of available restoration crews to 12,000. But Beryl left behind devastating damage.
As it left our system midday on Monday, we had 2.26 million customers out of our almost 3 million customers that we serve.
At his press conference,
they underestimated the impact of the storm and the direction of the storm.
Patrick was very critical of CenterPoint's efforts.
It would appear they were not as prepared as they should have been and not ready to go as quickly as they could have been.
CenterPoint Energy should finish its damage assessment today, but the chair of the PUC suggested CenterPoint has a long way to go in restoring trust.
The massive power struggles continue nearly a week after Hurricane Beryl hit, and now Governor Abbott is vowing to hold CenterPoint Energy responsible for the prolonged outages.
But, and here's the important part, we are still in hurricane season right now, and solutions cannot wait until the next session. They are needed now to minimize power disruptions as we respond to tropical weather for the remainder of the summer and this fall. CenterPoint has completely dropped the ball with regard to getting power back on.
The situation pushed the Public Utilities Commission of Texas to announce today that it will investigate CenterPoint's response to Hurricane Beryl.
I think it's clear from the events of the last week that the quality of their infrastructure,
their ability to maintain that infrastructure and their communication with their customers has been called into question.
Austin Energy sent 20 line workers and 17 trucks to help restore electricity. Together with thousands of other line workers from across Texas and the country, they're putting in long hours in the heat and humidity.
You're looking left and right and seeing trees toppled, you're seeing telephone poles snapped, you're seeing widespread damage from this storm. So there's definitely the feeling that there's a lot of work to be done, but our crews are in good spirits and committed to getting the job done.
CenterPoint executives came before the Public Utility Commission to talk about what they did or didn't do before and after Hurricane Beryl.
In times of emergency, our responsibility is to respond quickly, to communicate clearly, to provide accurate information,
and how they plan to beef up the system's resiliency and go about gaining back the trust of the company's nearly 3 million customers.
I take personal accountability for the areas where we fell short of our customers' expectations.
Among immediate changes, CenterPoint executives said they will have a new outage tracker working by August 1st, that during power outages they would hold daily media briefings. They will enhance the power alert services that sends texts, calls, and emails to affected customers, fine-tune how they communicate the estimated time to restore to customers, and enhance call center staffing during weather events. CenterPoint told the PUC they have contact information for just 42% of their customers.
There are a lot of things that went wrong here and a lot of things that y'all need to fix.
Commissioner Jimmy Gluck-Felty.
This is a wake-up call to every utility around our state that they have to take serious the storms that are facing their system, the challenges that are facing their systems.
Commissioners' questions were wide-ranging, from the overgrowth of trees that brought down power lines to the pre-staging of out-of-town line crews to the violence and threats they faced. Commissioner Lori Cobos was skeptical of the way critical facilities like hospitals and cooling centers were treated in the aftermath of Beryl.
You know, whether it's through your communication channels or preparation through mobile DG, whatever it is that you can do to make sure these types of customers don't lose power or quickly restore the power.
Commissioner, you have my commitment. Our performance was not where it needs to be, and we will get better. We have 8,600 critical facility customers on our system. We started working with them on July 7th before the storm. That's insufficient. We need to be working with them year-round on preparation and coordination.
Chairman Thomas Gleason asked CenterPoint to offer suggestions for new laws or regulations.
Please bring forth items that need to be addressed in statute. Anything that's there that could have helped during this, let us know, let the legislature know, talk about that.
What is very clear is that critical aspects of our restoration efforts were not at the high standards we expect of ourselves, let alone what the public expects of us. This is unacceptable and it will change. I take personal accountability for the areas where we fell short of our customers' expectations. And I want to personally apologize to our customers and their families for what they experienced.
State House representatives say those families and those who lost their lives deserve answers, and they'll keep holding the energy company accountable.
Including Christine Davis, 110 years old. Imagine what she's had to endure in her life. And for the year 2024, she passes away due to the fact that she could not get power to her home.
They reiterated how they keep hearing the same excuses.
We'll do better, it's inexcusable. But that's not enough. These people want to know that this will not happen again.